They sneered, thinking I'd fail. I'm Elise Kane, 30, a ghost in Aunt Beatrice's Dallas mansion where chandeliers glare like silent judges. At the Harrington's autumn gala, fake smiles and designer gowns hide their ignorance. My midnight blue dress conceals my secret. Hurting untouched cider. I breathe wealth, citrus, leather, roses. They'll soon choke on their smirks. Elise and Beatrice's voice sliced through the hum like a flute played too sharply. Still working as a secretary at that tech place? What's it called again? SkyCore Innovation? I replied evenly. Still there, executive assistant to the CEO. Her pearl earrings swayed as she laughed lightly. Darling, you're far too smart to fetch coffee for someone else. You should be running something by now. I nodded, smiling just enough to be polite. I didn't tell her I was running something that SkyCore's board had quietly appointed me interim CEO 3 months ago after a sudden resignation. That just yesterday I'd finalized a $250 million 0 cents acquisition that would change our market position for good. But I wasn't here to impress. I was here to watch. Oh, Elise, Aunt Beatrice pressed, her smile sharp as a blade. Don't you ever tire of playing second fiddle? I could talk to Thomas Tayuchu a real role at Harrington Enterprises. I met her gaze, unyielding. I'm exactly where I need to be. Her eyes narrowed, sensing defiance, but not the depth of it. Suit yourself, dear. But ambition doesn't wait for wallflowers. Ellie Griffinigan as he swaggered over, one hand in his tuxedo pocket, the other twirling a bourbon. He'd recently become vice president of outreach at Harrington Enterprises, a glorified title for someone who golfed more than he worked. I heard SkyCore's hiring, he said, nudging me with his elbow. I can pull some strings for you. We need admins in legal. I took another slow sip. Thanks, Shane. But I'm happy where I am, he smirked. Happy is for people who've stopped trying, or people who've already won, I said softly, my voice a quiet. His smirk faltered, but he laughed it off, oblivious to the storm I'd unleash. Maybe he was right. I had stopped trying to prove myself to them. Their version of success had never included someone like me. I stared across the ballroom at the family legacy etched into oil paintings. Harringtons in suits, Harringtons at ribbon cuttings, Harringtons on magazine covers. I knew mine was coming soon, just not the way they expected. 10 years ago, when I was just 20, I'd sat in this very house in Uncle Thomas's walnut-mantled study with a flash drive full of business models and a fire in my chest. Fresh from MIT, I'd pitched a consultancy that would help minority-owned startups scale using AI-backed market analysis. Uncle Thomas leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. Consulting sounds risky. Aunt Beatrice laughed. Honey, you'd make a wonderful executive assistant. You've got the organized type. You're reaching too high, Elise, Thomas had added, his tone final. Stick to what you're good at, supporting others. I had smiled through their laughter, nodded when they said, maybe next year. I went home that night, slipped out of my heels, and stood barefoot on my tiny apartment balcony in North Dallas, whispering a promise into the dry Texas air. I built something so big they'll pretend they always believed in me. And now here I was, SkyCore's new CEO, quietly confirmed, publicly unannounced, the ink on our $250 million 0 cents deal with a global logistics firm still drying, the PR team already drafting my Forbes profile. Shane and Aunt Beatrice could keep their smirks because soon they'd be hosting another gala, and this time my face would be on the invitation. I didn't build it for applause, but I built it to prove, if only to myself, that I was more than their dismissals. I called it Apex Ventures, a name that meant height in Spanish, a nod to the places I planned to reach. It started above an auto body shop in North Dallas, the kind of place that smelled like grease and ambition. The walls were thin, the AC rattled, and the internet barely held during video calls. But I had a dream, a laptop, and the grit no one in my family had ever seen in me. They thought they'd buried me in doubt, but really, they'd handed me the shovel to dig my own path. Emplomabs wasn't just a company, it was a quiet rebellion. My first client was a struggling coffee roaster on the verge of bankruptcy. I spent every waking hour poring over their invoices, renegotiating bean contracts, rebuilding their wholesale model from scratch. when their revenue rose 25% in one quarter, spread fast through Dallas's startup scene. By 23, I felt the spark of something real, something mine. But I knew better than to put my name on the door, so I stayed in the shadows, letting partners front the deals while I orchestrated everything behind the scenes. Legal structuring, growth plans, investor decks. My name wasn't in the headlines. Months later, I overheard Shane at a family dinner, his voice dripping with scorn. Elise's little project? A hobby, not a business? She'll crash and come begging. I said nothing, but his words fueled me. Each contract I signed was a silent retort, a brick in the empire they couldn't see drafted. Facts expanded fast. Seattle, Atlantic, Tucson, each new branch was a quiet victory. Every contract signed was a reminder that I was no longer... The girl laughed out of Uncle Thomas' study. But to the Harringtons, I was still just Elise, the assistant, the disappointment, the invisible one. That didn't bother me. Not when I was helping real people, like the team at Stonefield Gear, a family-run equipment company in Kansas on the verge of being bought out and gutted. When I saw that Harrington Enterprises, led by Uncle Thomas, was targeting them, everything changed. It wasn't just about growth anymore. It was about integrity. While Harrington Enterprises used predatory buyouts to strip companies for parts, Apex took a different path. We helped these businesses breathe again. I built a private research unit within Apex, confidential, fast-moving. They tracked acquisitions, mapped Harrington's patterns, a shipyard in Corpus Christi, a spice brand in Santa Fe, a solar firm in Arizona. We reached out before Harrington could close. Let us review your books first. There might be a better way. Many said yes. Those who did, we worked miracles, custom 90-day plans, cash flow triage, strategic pivots. Most never sold. They survived and thrived. Every time we saved a company from Harrington Enterprises, it felt like balancing the scale. But I never said a word, not to the clients, not even to my team. To them, I was Ellie, the operations lead who never missed a deadline. Last month, I found a note from Shane slipped under my office door. He heard you're meddling in our deals. Back off, Ellie, or you'll regret it. I crumpled it, my resolve hardening. He thought he could intimidate me, but I was already 3 steps ahead. But in the quiet moments after long nights of strategy sessions or field visits, I'd walk through our Dallas headquarters, glass walls humming with the energy of impact, and see my reflection in the windows. Not a secretary, not a shadow. A woman who had quietly shifted the tide. When Stonefield Gear came under direct threat, I knew it was time to step forward. Their land, legacy, and 60 employees were about to be swallowed by a Harrington shell company. I couldn't watch it happen. Our team built a counteroffer. Swift, airtight. We'd invest in Stonefield, not absorb them, keep their people, scale their innovation, and we had the capital to back it. Apex had just secured a $250 million, 0-cents partnership with a global logistics firm. The morning of the Stonefield meeting, I stood at the head of our top-floor boardroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows open to the Dallas skyline. Cranes, sunlight, movement. My tailored indigo suit felt like armor. 8 years of quiet winds pressed into every seam. Mara, my executive assistant, laid out the files with a smile. "They're all downstairs," she said, press included. For the first time in a decade, I wouldn't be behind the scenes. I'd walk into that room as Elise Kane, founder and CEO of Apex Ventures. Not for revenge. For every voice that had been ignored, including mine. Elise's quiet rise and fearless defiance move you. Don't miss what comes next. Subscribe now to follow her journey from the shadows of doubt to the spotlight of power. Each chapter reveals how resilience rewrites legacy, one bold move at a time. Her story isn't over, and neither is yours. Join us as the truth steps fully into the light. For terms, equity ratios, acquisition leverage. At precisely 8:45 a.m., the Harrington Enterprises delegation arrived at the Pinnacle Plaza conference level in downtown Dallas. Uncle Thomas led, with Claudia Harrington. They didn't recognize the woman at the head of the table, not really. To them, I was still the forgettable niece who once fetched coffee at family parties and silently filled out spreadsheets no one asked for. I stood, buttoned my blazer, and met their eyes with composure. "Good morning," I said evenly. I'm Elise Kane, CEO of Apex Ventures, and I'll be leading today's meeting. Claudia's fountain pen slipped from her hand and hit the table with a sharp clink. Shane's smirk froze, jaw tensing as he flipped open his notepad like it could shield him. Uncle Thomas blinked slowly, squinting, as if reading my name tag would change what he was hearing. He asked, CEO. I nodded, letting the silence stretch before adding, You never saw me because you never bothered to look. I motioned to Mara, who distributed the proposal folders across the table, each sealed with Apex's gold crest. Inside, the full merger offer for Stonefield Gear, backed by our 40% share acquisition already secured through private placement. I calmly recited the list of strategic blocks we'd implemented in recent quarters. Blue Peak Textiles, Sunray Solar, Metapulse Tech. All transactions you attempted, all steps laid through Apex intervention. The room stilled. My voice was steady, but each word landed with purpose. I wasn't here for personal revenge. I was here to reclaim the dignity so many families had lost at the hands of ruthless takeovers. The Tom base didn't move, but the veins on his temple betrayed him. Shane rifled through the document, muttering about regulatory scrutiny. Claudia whispered, She's been in the room this whole time. I leaned forward. You can sign the merger agreement, retain partial benefit, or wait. In 10 days, I'll complete the open market acquisition of Stonefield's remaining shares. Apex will hold control, with or without your participation. Thomas pushed back his chair, storming out without a word. Mara leaned toward me. You want to pause the meeting? I shook my head. No. Let them feel the shift. 15 minutes passed, the boardroom remained tense, quiet, but charged like the air before a storm. Then the door opened. Thomas returned, jaw set, but the fire in his eyes was gone. He sighed. His pen scratched across the page, like a reluctant surrender. I gave a respectful nod, gathered my folder, and walked out into the hallway. The Dallas skyline gleamed through the glass. Spring wind rushed through the atrium doors, sharp and electric, but I didn't feel cold. That afternoon, Apex private valuation soared by 20%. Harrington Enterprises slumped 9.1%. For the first time, my name appeared on Bloomberg's evening crawl. Elise Kane, the enigma behind Apex Ascent. I didn't relish their humiliation. That moment wasn't for them. It was for every person told to stay quiet, for every business owner bullied into signing away their life's work. 3 weeks later, I received formal notice. Apex 35% stake in Harrington Enterprises entitled me to nominate a candidate for their board. I didn't hesitate. The boardroom that day was colder than the AC dial, sham long walnut table, Trevin's 10 sets of eyes that didn't know whether to flinch or fake a welcome. I walked in wearing an ivory pantsuit, heels clicking with certainty. Their legacy was stitched into the wallpaper, but I carried something stronger. Earned power, quiet but undeniable. Shane was absent, sidelined by legal inquiries tied to a failed acquisition scheme that finally caught up with him. I stood at the front of the Harrington Enterprises boardroom, surrounded by men who once dismissed me as an admin with delusions. My voice was even, my message unmistakable. Harrington Enterprises will no longer strip businesses to the bone. We will rebuild them with integrity, with intention. At first, silence, then slow, hesitant applause, a few claps from junior board members, then a wave of reluctant respect followed. Awkward, yes, but real. A week later, Claudia Harrington sent an email with a single line. You did the impossible. I'd like to learn from you. I saved it unread, but not deleted. Uncle Thomas submitted his resignation the following month. His letter was raw, handwritten, almost vulnerable. I misjudged you, Elise. You've shown us a better way. I folded it neatly and placed it beside my first investor contract, reminder of battles won not through vengeance, but vision. Aunt Beatrice, caught mocking my little startup in a now viral clip, quietly disappeared from industry panels. No statement, just silence. At a Dallas finance conference, I passed Uncle Thomas in the lobby. He didn't speak, only gave a small nod of acknowledgement. These weren't trophies. They were tremors, signs that something in the system was shifting. A culture long ruled by extraction and ego, turning, however slowly, To listen back at the Apex office, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking White Rock Lake. Lights from the bridge shimmered like stars caught in water. I hadn't built this to destroy my past. I'd built it to rewrite the future. The media finally found me, front pages, financial segments. But I chose my moments. The spotlight is powerful if used wisely. At a San Francisco gala in 2024, I accepted the Strategic Innovator Award beneath a sky so clear it looked unreal. As I stepped to the podium, I scanned a sea of suits, scholars, and changemakers. I cleared my throat and smiled. 8 years ago, I began. My family laughed when I said I wanted to build a consulting firm. They told me to marry smart, not build bold. The crowd laughed with me. The good kind, warm, knowing. I listened, I added, just not the way they meant. More laughter, then stillness. Success isn't this award or evaluation. It's a message from a student that says, I didn't think I could until I saw you. The applause thundered, long and alive invitations flooded in after that night. Business schools, innovation summits, women's leadership forums. I accepted carefully. Not to bask in the spotlight, but to share the truth behind the shine. The late nights buried in spreadsheets, the mornings filled with doubt, the choices to stay in the shadows until I was ready to lead in the light. In every audience, I found someone, a young woman, a quiet voice, who reminded me of who I was. That's why I launched the Pinnacle Fund, a venture capital initiative for women-led startups. Former assistants, single mothers, night shift nurses, turned tech founders. Not just dreamers, doers. My heart swelled, not for the size of Apex, but for the scope of the dreams we were igniting. Then, one morning, a plain white envelope arrived on my desk, hand-relimbered and marked for Elise Kane's eyes only. Inside was a letter from Uncle Thomas. I thought business was power and control. You showed me something else. Humanity. I'm stepping down permanently. I sat in my chair, coffee warm in my hands, not feeling triumphant but reflective. Real change had come, not just in me, but in the very system that once confined me. I tucked the letter into Apex's strategic journal, where we log our biggest shift, because sometimes justice arrives not with noise, but with a signature and a quiet apology. The first Pinnacle Fund roundtable felt like a sunrise. Around me sat women no one had ever bet on, nurses, teachers, immigrant founders, their voices clear, confident, bold. And I knew we weren't just rebuilding businesses. We were rebuilding belief. I saw my journey reflected in theirs, the sting of being overlooked, the quiet strength to rise. Anyway, Apex was no longer just a firm. It had become a signal fire, calling out to anyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough. I realized then my legacy wasn't written in headlines or stock valuations. It lived in the courage I helped awaken, the permission I gave others to dream fearless. My month after the Harrington boardroom shift, my life was unrecognizable. No more hiding behind job titles or behind-the-scenes influence. I was Elise Kane, a symbol for those once dismissed. The world finally saw me. But I stayed grounded, choosing purpose over prestige. At a summit in Chicago, I told a crowd of young women, power isn't handed to you, it's built, brick by quiet brick, even when no one's watching. Apex thrived, but the Pinnacle Fund became my heartbeat, supporting women who'd been ignored yet now launched ventures blooming like wildflowers after a storm. Once the girl mocked for dreaming too big, now I rise not to prove anyone wrong, but to show you that you can rise too. Elise's journey moves you? Subscribe and share your voice below. Let's build boldly.